Michael. First of all, I'm glad you're all here. Thanks for coming. I do encourage you, if you actually have some questions on RethinkDB, bother one of our engineers and be like, hey, I have this bug. Can you fix it for me? They'll appreciate that. I'm going to be talking about some very cool RethinkDB features. Well, two of them actually. First is using binary data and storing binary data in your database. Second is change feeds, real-time change feeds on your data. I'm going to do this in two parts. First, I'm going to show you a little simple application that uses both these features, and then I'm going to walk you through some very, very simple code samples of how that actually gets implemented. And you can see how sort of the mechanics behind it work, okay? So I might regret this, but I want all of you, at least if you want to go to realtimephoto.jsj.com, okay? Here's how this works. So in here, you can drag and drop images, okay? And you can all do this, no authentication or anything. It's my GitHub thingy. And you can move these around and delete them and download them. So I don't know if anyone, apparently no one's doing it. Okay, let's see. Can we get one? Basically it all happens in real time. So when one of you does this, it will show up immediately. Oh, there it is. Self-promotion. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, for example, now I can take someone else's images and move them around. This actually doesn't work in Firefox, by the way. Sorry, only Chrome. Our developer, he's not very good. Cool, right? So there's a couple of things going on here, right? When you drag and drop an image, it basically gets sent to the server. The server then saves that image. Now, the interesting part is that then we listen to changes on our images table in the database. The database informs our server of changes, and then through a socket connection, our client through a socket connection, our server informs all clients of what's going on. Okay, some great stuff. Let's play around with this a little bit more first. I'm going to download this one. Then I'm going to delete it. I'm going to move this one. Okay. This one's great. Oh, and the logo. Come on, let's delete that. Okay. So you can see more or less how this works, right? So it's actually pretty simple. And so this is kind of how the architecture of this works, right? There's 4 parts to this. Again, the client first sends the image to the server, okay? The server then saves that image in the database as binary data. Keep in mind, we're not actually saving a path or anything. We're saving the binary data in the database, okay? It's different. Then the database informs the server of changes on that table, and then the server broadcasts those changes to all clients. So how does this actually work in terms of code? First, if we have an element, let's say a div, for example, and we add a listener to it, we say, okay, when the user drops the files on that element, we're going to execute this callback, right? And we have an event on it. This event now has a data transfer attribute, and that data transfer attribute has a files attribute. Those are the files that the user has dropped in that div, okay? With that file, we create a form data object. Now, a form data object is a way to send a multi-part form data object, kind of like a form, to a server. It's used for binary data, for example. So we can send files through JavaScript, basically, okay? And we basically have some key value pairs, right? File is file name is file name, type is file.type, right? When we create this multi-part form object, we now send it through a post request. Pretty simple, HTTP request to /image, right? Am I going too fast? No? Good. Okay. Second part. We've now sent this file from the client to the server, okay? Now it's up to the server to take this image and save it in the database. So we create an endpoint for this. We say, when the user hits image with a post request, this is going to be your function. And it has a request and a response, right? This is Node.js Express stuff. If you're familiar with it, you'll understand this. If you're not, then it's probably not that different from any other sort of HTTP request, right? Now, once that function gets fired from a request, we parse that function. This is a multi-part form submission, right? So basically, we have to take all that binary data. It's basically a binary stream of data, and we turn it into two variables, a fields variable and a files variable, okay? Fields and files is basically the same thing we saw here, right? Our file attribute is going to be inside our files array, and our file name and type is going to be in our fields, right? Because it's basically text. Now, what happens is that this parse function actually saves our file in the server, okay? We now have access to that file in our server. So we can just take the path to that file and just read it directly from our server. This read file function provides us a buffer, okay? A buffer is basically the file loaded into memory, okay? And with that buffer, we create a simple, straightforward JavaScript object, right? And we just insert it into the database, right? Again, we built a super simple, JavaScript object and saved it into the database, right? Table images, insert image, and then run it. I added this callback at the end, .then, right? This is what happens after the image has been inserted. And as you can see, it does nothing, okay? And that's completely on purpose, because I wanted to make it very clear that the fact that we're inserting the image has nothing to do with how we listen to that image, how we know that a new image has been inserted, okay? And that's kind of like the cool thing about RethinkDB. And I'll show you that in a bit, right? The database independently informs the server that this image has been added, right? And we do that by creating, you could call it, it's a listener, and it's what we call change feeds, okay? So if we write a simple RethinkDB query on the table images, we're basically saying, okay, give me all the images, and then let me know when there are any changes on that table. We run that query, and that query provides us with a cursor. The cursor is basically a reference to the rows, to the documents in that table, right? And the way it works is that the cursor has a method called each. Every time a new document is inserted, updated, or deleted, this each function will be called with the document reference that change is what's updated or deleted, right? You could see that here with that photo attribute, right? So we inserted an image, and that callback function is going to get executed. And what do? We say, okay, if this value is not null, then just send this new image to every single client, okay? And there's, io.emit is basically a reference to all the socket connections in that server, okay? Now, what's the last step in this process? The client now needs to receive that new image and render it, right? So the client has a socket connection, establishes a socket connection to the server. Localhost 8000, but it could be any address, obviously. And as you can see, the name of that event, image update, is the same of this event right here, right? So once the client, our browser, gets this new image, we now need to read that file. We can't just create a new element with that and just pass it that image.file. We basically read that file using a file reader, and we turn it into a base64 string. A base64 string is basically nothing more than a binary file represented as a string that we could actually use in the browser. Okay? So we do that. We set up a non-load listener or callback, and then we can just append it to the DOM. Right? This is a very simple example where it just like basically substitutes the image, but that's what it does, right? e.target.result is a base64 string. It's a string representing our image. Okay? And again, I want to point out that this, right, this callback, again, has nothing to do with how we inserted the image. We were listening to changes in that table, and it is through that we updated the DOM, right, by the socket connection. Okay. Does that make sense? Well, thank you very much. If you want, you could see the repo for this in real-time photo tutorial. You could check out rethinkdb.com. We have a lot of other great tutorials on this. Or if you have a question, you could just ask us a question on Twitter. Thank you.